Shabbat Shalom. Picture, if you will, two brothers at the dawn of the world, each of them seeking God, each of them seeking to offer a sacrifice, a korban, the word we hear so often in the book of Vayikra. These two brothers, Cain and Abel, each do what they feel is right. It doesn't work out so well. In fact, shortly after the first sacrifice is the first murder. Cain kills his brother Abel for having gained God's favor and him not having received the same recognition. We have to wait 24 generations before we fix this problem. Here, in this week's Torah portion, we have Moses and Aaron, two brothers who lived much of their life apart, probably not nearly as close to each other as Cain and Abel were. Two brothers who are the leaders of a community, one of them clearly in a superior position with God. Moses speaks to God in a way that no other person ever has. But Aaron doesn't murder him. What a concept. He doesn't even seem to be jealous of his brother. Instead, he is willing to be his mouthpiece, to assist in transmitting God's words to Pharaoh and to the Jewish people. But now the hard part. Moses has been on top for this entire time. Now Moses has to turn to his brother Aaron, and God commands him to hand over the priesthood. You'll notice throughout this whole section, Moses was doing the sacrifices. Once he is done, he will never get to stand at the altar of God again. Ever. He will not be able to officiate as a Kohen. Only his brother and his brother's children will be able to do it. Moses' children will not. And Moses does it without murdering his brother. It's bizarre. And I say it's bizarre with a full understanding that it's incomprehensible for all of the generations of humanity leading up to this point in the Torah. We have only seen strife between brother and brother, or perhaps at least begrudging acceptance of the other person's right to exist separate from me. But to have two of them stand side by side, each with their own unique power and place within our people, and especially to have Moses relinquish part of his authority and give it to his brother, is truly astounding. And something that perhaps we take for granted, and we should not, because this problem persists today. Not that brothers are killing brothers all that often, but it happens with more frequency than we would like. But because the same issues that underlined the killing of Abel continue to plague us to this day. But to understand why they continue to plague us, we have to understand the solution that happened with Moses and Aaron. Why was Moses able to give up what he had in order that his brother have this portion? Why did he do it? Yeah, he was. He was given a command, right? God told him, your brother will be the one doing this. Except God also told Cain not to be upset about the whole Cain and Abel sacrifice thing. That didn't seem to stop Cain from going out and murdering his brother. And in fact, later on, God will tell Moses, you don't get to go into the land of Israel. And Moses won't shut up about it and will continue to complain and ask God to reconsider. So we can't only look to the fact that Moses was commanded to understand why he was willing to share this power with his brother. Because both from others who were commanded as well as Moses himself, simply being commanded doesn't always seem to work. As a matter of fact, we are all commanded to love our fellow as ourselves, and yet we don't seem to have a great track record on that either. So commandedness, yes, is the spark that moves him to do this. Without the command, he may not have thought of doing it on his own. But it is not enough. And the other reasons why Moses might have been willing to do this at this point. Well, let's go back to the last bit of family advice that Moses got. He is there at Mount Sinai trying to wrangle these thousands and thousands of Israelites who have just left Egypt, and he is working day and night to manage their affairs. And what does his father-in-law say? You need help. Dude, you can't do this on your own. And that can't wasn't meant to be a criticism of Moses' ability. That can't was universal. No one can do everything on their own. And Moses learned at that moment, in blinding clarity, that despite his position as being the greatest prophet of all time, despite his position as someone who has just had a stare-down match with Pharaoh and won, that does not mean that he is going to be forever and always the person with 100% of the authority and the only person upon whose shoulders the entire nation, let alone the world, would rest. It cannot work like that. Partly because Moses would die. It is simply impossible for any one person to take on that much responsibility. But also because it doesn't work. It wouldn't be good for the nation. You wouldn't be able to accomplish what you think you want to accomplish. That was the main point that Yitro, his father-in-law, was trying to tell him, is that not only will you get burnt out, but the nation will not get justice if you are trying to adjudicate every last thing. You need to have other people working at different levels, yes, to make sure that it is correct and there is some oversight, but you cannot properly administer justice if there is only one judge. You will fail not because you are inadequate, but because you are simply human and thus limited. And recognizing that, I believe, was the precursor to Moses being prepared to hand over authority to Aaron. But then God had to make it tricky, because he said, hand it over to Aaron. When the tricky part here, I believe, wasn't just that he was his brother and sibling rivalry, which we saw was a plague throughout Genesis, but the problem here is that this happens after the golden calf. Think for a second about Aaron's qualifications for the job, right? And then try and decide whether this is nepotism. Right? Aaron's qualifications to be the Kohen Gadol are: he is related to Moses, and he helped the people build the idol that they were trying to worship when Moses was up getting the Torah on Mount Sinai. So he's clearly a popular community leader because he was leading them down that road. He clearly has a religious bent because he was doing the whole idol service thing. So those are his qualifications. There was no one better in the entire camp? That's the time? Not fair, indeed.
He also had Moses against Pharaoh.
And he stood alongside Moses for Pharaoh. Yes. So yes, that is fair. He does have one more part to his CV. On his resume, he does also have, was a spokesman for Moses against Pharaoh. Indeed. Perfectly qualified? No. Somebody who was willing to bend and almost break the entire nation the moment his brother's back was turned doesn't seem like the kind of person that you'd want to put in the position of Kohen Gadol. Now, there are a lot of other reasons why he was chosen, and that's a whole other class and discussion. But I'd like to at least entertain one notion, which is that he was chosen precisely because he had had that mistake. Precisely because he had had the mistake. First of all, who better to understand the mistake of giving in to pressure when trying to orchestrate the service for the people than somebody who had experienced that, seen the repercussions, and now would not let it happen again. Firing a person because they've made one mistake means that you have wasted the opportunity of them to be educated, and now you have to go to a different person who hasn't had that mistake, that experience, and perhaps is less qualified in the first place. Taking somebody who has learned and allowing them to build off of that experience is actually very sensible. But even more important for both Moses and the lesson that is then portrayed for the rest of us is we have to relinquish power to other people when we are told it is right, even if we don't think they are right. And that is hard, and that is why we need flawed Aaron to be the person to take over. If Moses had said, well, I'm going to go through the entire camp of Israelites and we're going to do a big job search and we'll find who is the best Kohen Gadol, do you think there was anyone in that camp who is as perfect a candidate as Moses? Of course not. Nobody can come close. So how is Moses going to look at all their resumes and say, well, I could do the job so much better than these idiots? Why am I hiring them? Why do I need them? Right? We'll just wait until we get a better candidate. Maybe we'll set up a training program and we'll see who comes out of it. Right? We'll get an apprentice Kohen and he'll work with me, and if I don't like him, then I'll fire him and we'll get another. Moses would have been the Kohen for the rest of his life, and when he died, there would be no replacement. Moses and us, we have to learn that we don't hand over authority, power, or anything else to someone else because they are the perfect candidate, but because it's the right thing to do. It was a command from God to have a Kohen Gadol and for it to be Aaron. And even if Moses had misgivings, which were hinted at in the trope of Shalshelet, which Judy chanted so beautifully, which goes shows his hesitancy, even if he had those misgivings, he still did it. Because it wasn't his place to decide that God's trust was misplaced. The same thing happens if you are a parent. How many of you have watched your kid drive out of the driveway for that first time having a misgiving about their driving skills? I hear a lot of chuckling. But it was their right. They had passed the test. They had met the requirements. Why would they not be able to drive? Were you going to lock them in the room for the rest of their life? When they decided they wanted to move out and take a job across country that you didn't think was a good fit, you may have voiced that, but did you chain them to the bed? No. It is their right to grow. And even as you said, oh, but remember back in middle school when you made this mistake? And they're like, Mom, that was 10 years ago. You remember it, but that doesn't matter. What matters is they have the right to step out, to make those decisions, to be their own person. And you have to respect and recognize that. So too, with it be a colleague at work that has a job to do and you think that they are not great at their job and they come to you and say, hey, I need the folder from the blah blah account. You don't get to say, oh, I'll get that to you tomorrow because you'd rather not hand it over because you think they're going to make a mess of it. If they've been given that job, that task, you give it. And you do your best to make sure that it goes successfully. Who are you to gatekeep? Them having what is their due, what is their responsibility. And who are you to imagine that you can best serve your family, your company, your community by taking everything onto your own shoulders because no one else is as qualified as you? I don't believe God commanded anyone to do that. I believe we just read a Torah portion where the greatest man ever was commanded precisely not to do that. And if Moses can't do it, then nor can we. A family, a community, an institution is built by sharing the responsibility and recognizing that other people will not do things as well as you think you could do, but that you cannot do everything and shouldn't do it either. Because it is their family, their business, their institution, their community, their country, their world, and all of us have to share in that process. It is a hard lesson to learn as a parent, as I'm finding out with a daughter now who is legally an adult. And I have to keep reminding myself that. It is a hard lesson to learn, but an important one. And if Moses could learn how to let go and trust his brother, even after the mistakes that Aaron had made, perhaps especially because of the mistakes that he had made, then we can learn to trust one another as well. Deepen your ability to be patient and to let go, to relinquish, to not over-worry. Other people are people just like you. They may not do their life exactly like you, But they'll do okay. And we'll all be better for having created that relationship of trust and understanding. We'll all do better for having followed the model of followed the model of Aaron and Moses. They are our leaders in so many ways. Shabbat Shalom.